All right, I am back here on the Just End the Suffering podcast. I am talking Big East hoops and the UConn Huskies with the guy who covers them for the Hartford Courant. Dom Amore is here. Dom, how are you?
I'm good, Mike. What's going on? How's everything?
Everything's going pretty good. I have to say, watching
Yeah.
college basketball has been a lot of fun for me because it's one of my favorite sports. And
Uh-huh.
this season definitely has been so unusual with all the COVID pauses and
Yeah.
no fans in arena stuff like that. For somebody who's covering the sport right now, like how different has this been for you compared to previous years covering the team?
Well, of course, everything in our world is different. Not just college basketball, not just sports. Nothing is really like it was, or even close to like it usually is. And college basketball is no different. Not having fans in the arenas makes every game seem like a neutral site game. And not having it's almost like the preseason tournaments when you're playing in a ballroom in the Bahamas or something, and there's just a handful of fans in the stands because it's basically a made-for-TV event. And that's what most of the games have that feel, as I'm sure is the same with the NFL and MLB and the NBA. It's been strange because you've had the long breaks and the disruptions. You never have to worry about a game being postponed. Whereas now you do, and of course with those long you don't have teams playing the same numbers of games. So a lot of those things none of that's the same. And as far as our end of it, it's trying to cover sports the way we do by either watching games on TV or maybe in a couple of cases in the arena, and then only the Zoom calls where you can't really talk to people and get a feel for what's going on with those important off the record conversations that sports writers have. It's really, really hard to do what we do, but it's the best we can. It's what we've got for at least for this season. And I think on the whole, Mike, it's been a season where I think fans have been entertained. The games have often been very, very good. There's some interesting teams and interesting storylines out there. And, after some disruption in January, the month of February and early March has been pretty good. They've been able to get most of the games in, and it looks like the NCAA tournament's going to come off. So much like baseball and football, they've had their problems, but it looks like they're going to get to the finish line with a season that means something.
Yeah, it definitely is the case. One of those teams that's interesting right now is the team that you cover, UConn. And this year, obviously, this was playing before the pandemic. Now they come back to the Big East, and I think it's a good fit for them to be back home in the Big East. 'Cause I feel like it's more geographic sense for them. They have traditional rivals in there. How do you think that the transition back to the Big East play has gone for UConn so far?
Well, frankly, it couldn't have gone much better. The fans, of course, always think it should go better, and they should be like 18-2 or whatever. But I don't see how you could fault being 11-6 in the Big East, being the number 3 seed in the Big East tournament, which they've now clinched. It's gone about as well as it could possibly go. It's unfortunate in the sense that there was so much anticipation in Connecticut for being back in the Big East, playing this first year in the Big East, playing these old rivals again, that the atmospheres at the games in Connecticut would have been absolutely off the charts. And for UConn to be making a tournament run again after 5 years, the pent up frustration over that finally letting itself out, this would have been a very, very special, one of a kind season for UConn basketball if they were able to play their full schedule, with fans. Next year there'll be plenty of excitement next year, but you'll never have another chance to be that first year back in the league. So in that sense, there's a little something missing. But I think as far as UConn goes, this is the league they belong in. This is the league they always should have been in. Nothing against the American Conference. It's a very good basketball conference, but UConn just didn't fit in it. They fit in this league, and they're playing opponents that UConn fans want to see. So I think the future of all of that will bear out that this was the best thing that could have happened to UConn. But I think they're holding up their end of it this year and having some success.
Yeah, they definitely are. And one of the more interesting players on that team, somebody who has not gotten attention nationally because he missed a lot of games, was James Bouknight, the star guard for UConn. Obviously, he's come back. They've won 5 of 6, and he's made a big part in those games. So, like, how important is he to this UConn team, James Bouknight?
Well, I mean, he's the whole. I don't want to say he's the whole team, but he's the focal point. You know, he's the one guy that they have that really demands a double team, which makes everyone else more effective, even when he's not doing anything. His mere presence out there, frees up other people to do things. But he's a great player. He's a dynamic scorer. He's the one guy that you can, like Shabazz Napier in the past, or Kemba, in a big spot, you can give him the ball and say, "Hey, James, make a play." And they don't have to draw something up or execute something. Just say, "Hey, James, make a play." And you saw a play last night where it was literally the entire. There were nothing but Seton Hall players between him and the basket, and he somehow got through them all and got to the basket and scored. And there aren't many players that could do that. He's certainly the only guy UConn has that can do that, and that kind of typifies the impact that he has on the entire team.
Yeah, he really does. I mean, they look like a night and day difference between him on the floor versus him on the sideline when he got hurt. And I think obviously he's very important. But who else on that team you think is like a big X factor for them to try and make some noise in March?
Yeah, well, as important as his impact has been, since he returned from the injury. Excuse me. It's just as important that the supporting cast was able to go 4-4 without him. To play 500 ball in the Big East with the kind of teams that the league has top to bottom is not easy to do. But they're keeping the team above water 4-4 while he was out is really a key to UConn being where it is right now. But R.J. Cole, the transfer from Howard, St. Anthony's kid out of Jersey, struggled early in the season. I think, after sitting out a year, the transfer, moving up from the MEAC to the Big East, a huge jump, probably took him a while to get up to speed. But he's playing great right now. He's been huge. He and Bouknight now have formed this lethal backcourt combination that I think can match up with just about anybody. And UConn's getting a lot from the front court with Isaiah Whaley, the senior, an unheralded player that Dan Hurley inherited and really, really has helped develop into a very, very good player. And, of course, Adama Sanogo, another Jersey product who UConn kind of snatched out from under Seton Hall's nose. And, man, he made some difference last night. Imagine if he were playing for Seton Hall instead of UConn. So they've got a pretty good supporting cast. Tyreese Martin, the transfer from Rhode Island, has been in and out, hot and cold. He's been cold lately. But he's also a very important player for UConn when he's right and as a complement to the Bouknight and Cole combination.
Yeah, it makes some sense for sure. I think obviously one thing that's helped them is that the Big East, I think, compared to what it's been the last couple years, a little bit down in my opinion. And I don't know. I know you've seen more games than I have in the Big East. Do you feel that the league is a little down compared to what it was even last year?
Well, I think probably a couple of the teams at the bottom are not as good as the bottom 2 or 3 teams of the Big East usually are. I think usually this team is pretty strong. If not 1 through 11, certainly 1 through 9, 1 through 10. This year, I think maybe, based on UConn's year, they beat Butler twice, they beat Marquette twice, they beat DePaul twice. So maybe those 3 teams aren't quite as up to the level that the bottom 3 of the Big East usually are. But, I still think, though, that this is a conference that is very, very, no one's going to go in a 20-game season. No one's going to go 18-2 in this conference. There are too many good teams, too many challenges every night. If you're a little banged up or a little tired or a little off, you can lose to just about anybody. And, I still think that when you go into the conference tournament, that there are probably at least 6 teams, if not more, that could conceivably make a run and win it. St. John's certainly could. Providence certainly could. Georgetown has played really, really well. I mean, UConn beat them last week, but they've been playing really, really well lately. and certainly Xavier. So I think, I do think that from the top of the league, Villanova, Creighton, UConn, through the middle of the pack, 6, 7 teams, 8 teams, I think the league's pretty darn good. I just, it may not be quite as strong 1 through 11 as it normally is.
Yeah, it makes sense. I want to get your opinion on some of these top teams based on what you've seen them so far. Because I'll start with Villanova too, because going into the year, Villanova was sort of like right up there with that Gonzaga Baylor duo. It was like, oh, these are the teams that are going to be the top dog this year. But something hasn't clicked with them. I don't know if it's just the effect of the COVID pause. Or they missed so many games down there, and now they lost Colin Gillespie last night to a big injury. So what's your takeaway on Villanova from what you've seen?
Well, certainly if you lose Colin Gillespie, you're in trouble for them. I mean, he's the key man for them in every way. He's a senior, and the position he plays and his production. Although they still have a lot of talent, a lot of experienced talent. Obviously, you take him out of the mix, and that pulls them back to the pack. The COVID pauses obviously didn't do them any good, especially the timing of some of them. But I don't know. I mean, when UConn played them, they looked awfully good to me, and that was only a couple of weeks ago. And they certainly made a statement last night against the Creighton team that obviously has some issues, that off-the-court issues that seem to be affecting them. But, Villanova, I mean, they look awfully good to me, and I'm sure that they're not going to be an easy out in the tournament, in the NCAA tournament. Although, without Gillespie, they're probably not a threat to go all the way.
Yeah, that makes some sense. You brought Creighton up, too, and obviously they have issues off the court right now. Greg McDermott's under some fire for some racially insensitive comments he made in the locker room. But in terms of on-the-court stuff, the thing I know is this team is that tremendous firepower offensively, have a lot of trouble on defense. I feel like they are kind of a team where I think their upside is like the Sweet 16. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, that's probably true. I know when they played UConn, they did beat UConn twice. Once in overtime, Bouknight, of course, dropped the 40 points on them that night or that day, and then the other time without Bouknight. Very explosive, very potent offensive team with Zagorowski. They don't play defense quite as well, but in a way that's sometimes you can't do both. If you play fast on offense and there's more possessions, you're not going to hold teams in the 60s. But I do think that but they're obviously quite capable of winning games in the 80s that are played in the 80s. Sweet 16 sounds about right for them, but they've got a lot of talent, they've got a lot of individual talent. And the possibility that, like a Zagorowski could go off and they could win almost any game that they play, is always there. But obviously, after last night, they beat Villanova, I think, a week or so ago. And then after last night, it really showed that there's obviously some distraction or some dispiriting that's going on from Greg McDermott's comments in the locker room. And they obviously were not the same last night. So they've got to get it back and get it back quickly if they're going to even make the Sweet 16.
Yeah, one other team I want to get to also Seton Hall, a team that UConn played. We're recording on Thursday, March 4th. They played them last night. UConn won convincingly. Seton Hall is one of those teams I feel like got hurt the most by the pandemic last year, canceling the tournament, because that team could have made the Final Four with the amount of talent they have. They lost a bunch of key guys. Still has Sandro Mamakouashvili, who's been a big star, but this sort of team has started trending the wrong direction as March starts. So, what did you know about Seton Hall last night?
Well, I'll tell you what, I still really like Seton Hall. I thought they were undervalued in the preseason. I felt that even though Miles Powell was gone, the supporting cast around him was a lot better than people thought and would shine. They've been hit with COVID pauses at terrible times, particularly just before the start of the season. They ended up missing 2 weeks of practice, coming back and only 2-3 days later going down to Louisville, and they nearly won the game. But they have very good, experienced big men. They've got an experienced point guard. I think they've got all the ingredients to be really, really good. But in the Big East, you could have a 3-game losing streak any time. That's not unusual. They've had theirs at the worst time, and it would not surprise me if the lights go on in the Garden and they all of a sudden, get hot and make a run, because I think they're good enough to do that. So I like Seton Hall. Even though they lost last night, I thought UConn just played exceptionally well and really took the game to them. And of course, that's something that you have to ask why Seton Hall allowed that to happen. But I really like their talent, and I really like a lot of things about their team, and I wouldn't write them off by any means, even at this late date.
Yeah, I think the Big East tournament next week's going to be fascinating because obviously you got the two locks at the top. I think UConn's pretty safe for the dance. Then you have that sort of Xavier, Seton Hall tier that's sort of like teetering between like being the first four, maybe one of the first four teams out of the field. And you got teams, like you said, who like St. John's, like Providence, who could go in there, get hot, and steal the tournament, get the bid. Steal the bid. I think this tournament's going to be one of the ones that I feel like a lot of those teams in the bubble will be watching very close to see what happens down at the Garden next week.
Yeah, they should, because this tournament's definitely ripe for a bid stealer, because you've got teams like, as you mentioned, Providence and Xavier in particular, and I guess you could put Seton Hall in that group as well. You've got teams that are probably not at-large material right now, but could very easily make it to the final and win it and steal that bid, taking the bid away from somewhere else. Whereas, I don't think that Villanova or Creighton or even UConn at this point is going to have a bid taken away from them. I mean, by someone else winning the Big East. I think the Big East will certainly be a 3-bid team and could very easily be a 4-bid team, or if somebody makes that run, even a 5-bid team. So, yeah, I think you have to have an eye out for Providence, have an eye out for Xavier, maybe even have an eye out for Georgetown in that Big East tournament. Somebody gets hot and starts winning. A bid could be stolen from somewhere else. This league is there's no way, Mike, of really evaluating how strong leagues are, because you didn't have the out of conference games to really have the metrics line up and add up the way they normally do. But remember, Marquette, which is at the bottom of the Big East, beat North Carolina and Wisconsin. Obviously UConn beat USC, a very, very, very good team out in the Pac-10. Villanova's got a lot of quality wins outside of the conference. So, this conference has been pretty good, and I think probably will not get the number of bids that it would have gotten in a normal year because of the way things go. But somebody could, any one of 6 or 7 teams, I think, could get hot and steal that Big East tournament.
Yeah, I think the one that I'm watching in terms of the actual steal, I think, is Providence, because Ed Cooley has a history of getting that team hot down the stretch. I remember last year they were surging down towards the tournament. They were coming back from the dead. And I mean, they played well enough, and there's enough talent there that I could see, maybe just get hot and they happen to steal it.
There's definitely enough talent there. Watson and Duke and Reeves. There's enough talent there to do that. And they were picked 3rd in the preseason in the Big East. I thought that might have been a little overvalued. I might have had Seton Hall 3rd and maybe Providence 5th. But I'll tell you what, they're very. I mean, they obviously played a great game to beat UConn at Providence. UConn did not have book night that game. A week later, with book night, UConn turned the tables. But Providence definitely has the talent and they have the pedigree to make a run. I would keep a very close eye on them when they get, if they get to day 2, they could just keep on going.
Yeah, I want to close it real quick, going back to UConn, because obviously you and I are both in agreement with that. They're pretty much in the field right now, barring some really, really strange circumstances. And the area seems to have seen them in a lot of these mock brackets, that 8-9 game, which a lot of the high majors don't want to be in, because that means you're getting the 1 seed the second round. So if UConn ends up there, they end up getting somebody like an Illinois or a Michigan in the second round. Do you think they can give them a big game?
Oh, I think they could give them a big game. I think, book night's going to be very, very tough to stop for anybody. And it's going to be very, very tough to stop him without putting so much emphasis in stopping him that one of 3 or 4 other players doesn't go off. But I think for UConn to get past a number 1 seed, they've really got to shoot lights out from 3-point range. And that means the one guy we didn't talk about, Tyler Polley, senior, great shooter, at least a great looking shooter, great form, but he hasn't necessarily hit consistently. But when he hits lights, when he shoots the way he's capable of as a 3-pointer 3-point shooter, that really changes the dynamic for UConn, especially with Book Knight out there. And I think it's something that you saw from the UConn team a few years ago when Niels Giffey started getting red hot from 3-point land in the postseason, and he just drew so much defense out there that the middle was open for Shabazz Napier and Ryan Boatwright. And you know how that turned out in that tournament as a number 7 seed. So I really think UConn would need that 3-point shooting piece to get past the number 1 seed. But I do think they're capable of that. And UConn hasn't been in the tournament in 5 years, Mike. They'll take an 8-9 game. If they win an 8-9 game and lose to a number 1 seed, UConn could, I think, put that away and say, well, this was a heck of a year, and there's nowhere to go. It's not trending anywhere but up from here. But I think an 8-9 seed seems most likely. I mean, I think if they win on Saturday, 11 wins in the Big East, and get a win in New York, you get to the semifinals. They could be better than that. They could be more like a 7. But one thing is, in the American Conference, you could win the whole league and end up being an 8-9 game. So I think that's a fringe benefit of being in the Big East.
Yeah, I think that certainly be fun to track in New York next week. Dom, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, how can people follow you on social media and keep up with your coverage of UConn for the Hartford Courant?
Yeah, well, you can follow me on Twitter at Amore Current, AMORE COURANT, and all my stuff appears on the Current website, Current COURANT.com. And of course, if you're in Connecticut, no reason you can't pick up a copy of the Hartford Courant anywhere where fine newspapers are sold. So do follow along, and I'll be with them to the end.
Yeah, we're definitely keeping up. I'm not in New Connecticut because I can't buy the paper there, but I will follow online. Dom, thanks for all the time. I appreciate it.
You got it.